This is Beyond Influential, with Brittany Crystal. Join Brittany as she chats with today's thought leaders about the power of influence, how it's developed, and how they get us to consume both on and offline. Here's your host, Brittany Crystal.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Beyond Influential. I'm here today with Chris Adamo. Chris is the Director of Partnerships and Growth at Where By Us, an experiential media company that helps locals explore and connect within their cities. Chris is also a founding partner of Social Venture Partners Miami, a nonprofit fund that is focused on social impact while making strategic investments in Miami's changemakers. He's also an investor in a few other ventures we'll touch on, as well as the Miami captain of Breakout, a national community that unites, inspires, and amplifies the people who are making the world a better place by hosting impactful events. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, Brittany, thanks for having me. Awesome to talk to you, and I know you're up to things yourself, so I'm pumped to hear about your endeavors as well.
So do you mind describing your background and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I've been working in partnership development for the past 15 years, I think, if you add them all up. Makes me about 37 years old, post-college. So I ran partnerships and business development over at 1-800-Flowers.com for 8 years, doing corporate sales and finding ways to make money for the company as they were a startup to begin with and became a Fortune 1,000 company over 20 years. So I would find ways to match our brand with other entities, like bundling Justin Bieber CDs with flower bouquets, or doing the Macy's Flower Show, or doing back-end programs with credit cards. So it spans a lot of things. My hands are always in different pots. So I grew up in New York, in Queens, New York. A kid from kind of modest parents. Dad was a construction worker. Mom was a hairdresser. Single parent for a while. My mom and I kind of grew up together. So I'm always having that frame of mind of taking care of myself, on my own. So it's been fun. I ended up in Miami 5 years ago. My wife had a lot to do with that. She's from here. I met her, and she kind of changed my life in a very positive manner. But I got to Miami, and in New York, I was there for 32 years, and I wasn't really maximizing my potential of building community where I was. I was kind of doing my job and going home. When I got to Miami, I found a place that really needed someone to kind of help change the way the city operated. So it's a very malleable place here. It's raw in a lot of ways, and it's very new. It's only 100 years old. So a place like New York's much more established communities than there are here in Miami. So I kind of found my stride here by doing things very grassroots oriented. That's kind of how we started Where By Us, to create these local publications that were based on community engagement, that started with civic engagement first and kind of grew into the arts and culture kind of secondarily. So we can talk more about that if that's something that's up your alley.
Oh, totally. But I have a quick question. So I saw on your LinkedIn you have an MBA. Did the MBA actually prepare you at all for any of the jobs that you had?
No, I don't think it did. I got it at a time when I was kind of in a rut in my career. I'm like, what am I going to do next with myself? And I just got to basically just get the MBA letters. It was more for building networks that I didn't have before. So I met folks through the MBA that ended up helping me in my career. So it was more of network building than anything else, and kind of the way you shape sometimes the way you think. So those two things are very important.
So you're incredibly civically engaged. Was that something that you were always interested in, or was this something that happened over time after 1-800-Flowers?
Literally never engaged in anything in my city before I got to Where By Us. So it happened in Miami. It really did. Out of just seeing how I can have an impact. Right in New York, I felt like I didn't really have that big of an impact. So it felt too big for me. But when I had a place that was a little bit smaller, but also equally a major city, in America, I really got involved in the nonprofit world. Just started joining some youth advisory boards. Started donating my time to things that I thought would help me expand my horizons. And then I kind of just found a big love for being that event coordinator, or just a person that can move the needle in different things that I was really interested in, which has a lot of benefits that are indirect that you wouldn't think about that would happen, but when you're a person that actually gets people together, you end up being someone that they look to for other things. So it could be advice, it could be partnering on projects, it can be just getting yourself in situations that you haven't thought about before, that helps you realize what things that you actually end up loving and doing. So I have found a lot of things through my role here that I never thought I would be interested in.
So I know you worked at a marketing agency in between 1-800-Flowers and Where By Us. How is that a different kind of approach to partnerships and brand building?
Yeah, so I mean, I worked for many years on the brand side, and then I took the lead in the agency world, and I kind of saw both sides of the equation and how they actually bring value to brands. And what I took from that, and now our company basically is a media company that has a built-in agency in it. So we do a lot of work with brands to build stylized products that look like kind of like they're sponsored projects, but they're helping us do our work better. So we end up working with brands like Lyft, like the Knight Foundation, like Baptist Health, Citibank, who really have mission-driven ideas of how they want to get across a message in a city that align with what is happening that we're covering. So we're kind of backing them into that mission-driven goals through sponsoring our work, and we end up bringing them into the fold onto in-person events that they wouldn't get to be at normally. That just feels like the right place to be at. It's not just like we're shoving down the throat of like, this is the brand's name. It's like, no, this is the actual good we're doing in the community, and this brand's helping us do it. And you probably should talk to them because they actually care about you and where you live. So I've kind of thought that the local approach to marketing is way more impactful than doing a national kind of branded campaign. I'm seeing that value firsthand now. So it kind of like plays to like what I'm doing here is building these localized approaches, but working with brands that have national kind of like approaches, a national attention as well.
So what exactly is Where By Us, and how does it work with the other properties that exist around it, like the New Tropic and the Evergrey?
Sure. So the Where By Us idea came about where we had these little like meetups every month about one topic. Like in Miami, it was transit or affordability or sea level rise. And we gather about 100 folks in a room and just have a big discussion about what they don't know about, what they want to have changed, what they want to get involved in. And from those, we kind of saw there's a gap in information sharing across probably every city in the world where people are not getting enough content about the things that they care about and going deeper into issues. So when a newspaper does its job right, you get that full story. But often now you only get one part of the story of whatever that writer wants to portray. So you don't get the backstory. You don't get how to get involved in a thing. You don't have the next steps. You don't have the engagement part. You just have this is happening. All right, that's where I'm going to leave you. So it's up to you to find out more and get involved. But we wanted to do the second step of local engagement, actually giving people a chance to get involved in an issue, to maybe raise their hand and say, I have a friend who does this. Can I put you in touch with this person? And kind of make those marriages happen in a much more useful way than I think media does in most local ecosystems. So the Where By brand started doing those, and then we started the New Tropic about 3 years ago. And it grew very much organically. We really made a point to like make our early 1,000 readers like our core audience of we tailor to whatever they want to know more about. So we would daily put questions out to them through our newsletters, through our channels on social, asking them what they think is interesting, what they want to know more about, and those are things that we end up covering. And using them as kind of like our flagpoles in their neighborhoods, in maybe their industries, to kind of give us more of an insight. And they end up writing for us and becoming employees and sometimes. So Seattle opened about a year ago. It's called the Evergrey. So every brand we open is a different name for a reason. We hire locals who run it for us. We just give them the back end kind of bones of how to run a media company. So we give them the newsletter builder. We give them all the tech and the social expertise. We help them find sponsors for big projects. That's usually around civic engagement issues like transit or affordability or sea level rise or arts and culture or nonprofits. And we have big plans for the next couple of years to open a lot more of them. So that's on the way. Which we're really excited about because we're seeing a way to kind of make civic engagement sustainable. A lot of times you're seeing paper shut down. You just saw last week the Gotham is closing its doors in New York City after years of being so valuable because the way they went about it was the wrong way. They went about it for impressions first and not for impact. So the way that we've seen the impact is measuring that and having aligned brands that actually have mission-based goals in those cities. Which in Miami, it's been super beneficial for people to get involved, even like knowing who to vote for. Like we do a voter guide that most people don't do, where we kind of sit down with each person running and understand what their kind of like feedback is in a city, what the future looks like, and letting the people decide for themselves to actually go out and vote.
So how do you guys measure impact then?
It's a lot honestly, we do a lot of in-person events. We do a ton of surveys and research with people in mind. So we'll do a quarterly study on basically taking the pulse of a city across different issues and taking the feedback from members and from readers and putting it back into the things that we do. So the brands often want to know, like, for instance, in Miami, we work with the transit authority, and their biggest thing is like understanding what people's gripes are on the trains and buses, and how to make that experience better. A lot of times it's not really the bigger things that they worry about. It's more of like, can I have Wi-Fi in this bus? Can I have more information of when this bus is coming? If there is something wrong with it, what is wrong? So it's more of like information that they want to have instead of like the general, like, build more trains. So that is like one big thing for us, how we work with partners to kind of understand what's happening in the city and measure, how their feelings are about the things they're reading and the events they go to. And that's really kind of where it starts, is that you have to really engage people in who are reading the content and who's coming to the events, on site, and then after the actual event happens.
So you're based right now, you have the new Tropic in Miami and you have the Evergrey in Seattle. How different is what these cities care about?
Polar opposite. You couldn't get more different places than Miami and Seattle, geographically and civic engagement wise. In Seattle, every person is educated, very well educated. Every person is engaged with what's happening in their neighborhoods, and they're kind of like, the most forward-thinking city in America. Miami is a much newer city. People are not engaged a lot of the times in what's happening locally because they're kind of still, halfway in, halfway out. It's very transient. So again, people to understand that it's important for you to take a stand in your neighborhood. What's happening in local elections. It's very much not part of what they had thought about when they got here. So we had to teach that. A lot of times you have to make that easier. So sometimes you have to put cheese on the broccoli to have someone actually eat the broccoli. So it's like making it more of like an easy thing to talk about. So if we're going to talk about, the future of Miami and how it's going to be affected by, the rising seas, how can we make that more digestible in a manner where someone's not scared to take that topic on? So it's more of like giving someone an entryway into that is not just too like information based. It's more of like, what do you think is happening here? And then let's share some more background on that and let you kind of like guide your way into it. And people have taken over that here. I think in the past 5 years, if you look at Miami, it's a different place. It really has grown a lot, development wise, and also I think education wise and business wise. So it's had a big impact that we've seen, from our readers just giving us feedback. And we've taken that to Seattle in a different manner, because in Seattle, it's like, how do you cut through what's happening? They already have like 15 local media brands, but no one's actually being the curator of the city. No one's taking a stance of like, let's engage around this issue more of what's happening across all of media and all of civic engagement. And that's kind of like our stance there, is like we operate as more of like your best friend in the city that wants to help you cut through the clutter. And that's something that kind of changes it, like kind of like goes across all cities, because that's how we kind of see our flagpole in a place, is like, we're your best friend in the morning and tell you what's what.
So then how do you guys generally get your message out there aside from having events? Is it social media? Is it just making content?
So every city starts with a daily newsletter that kind of is your cut through of what's happening event-wise and content-wise in the city. So we'll kind of read the news for you and give you a heads up of why it's important to read this article, and then link out to other things happening around that idea. So it could be events happening. It could be more content that we've seen written about that topic. That's how we start first. And that usually, once we get to about our first 5,000 readers, is when we kind of put the gas on the city and add some more people into place. It always starts with the newsletter and also with social. And we kind of like really invest in our first early readers to be our force of what we end up writing about and how we take the city on. It's a lot of public call outs. It's a lot of talking to people one-on-one. Usually when I go to a market, we do about 100 interviews with people. It could be everyone from the mayor to like a person who lives in low-income housing. So it really depends on we want to get the whole picture of the city. What's wrong? What could be changed? What's going right? And then we take that all data and we basically design like a 6-month plan of how we cover that place. And then usually from there it kind of grows by itself.
So you're the director of partnerships and growth. I think we should get into this a little bit. How do you find productive partnerships?
Man, that's tough, because I get a ton of emails every day from people who want to partner with us. I try and sort of be a matchmaker, because a lot of times I see a lot of people doing duplicative things in cities. So I try and often make larger partnerships that often people don't think about doing. So I'll try and bring in several nonprofits onto one agenda. Like they're all trying to maybe solve, affordability issues. So why can't we have like one bigger event together with several entities and having just one person raise money for one nonprofit? Which is kind of why I helped start Social Venture Partners here in Miami, because that big thing about social good is happening across many places in a city, and it's often people doing the same thing and trying to raise money from the same people. But we often do partnerships, across the board, across civically and for nonprofits, and also for just arts and culture, because people need a way to cut through a bunch of the clutter in these cities, because there's a lot going on. In Miami and Seattle, they have 20 events a day. I mean, you probably see from New York and LA, it's the same thing. But these like second tier cities are on their way up, and people are leaving these big cities in droves to come to these smaller places.
So how do you approach these cities differently then when it comes to actually outbound pitching?
When I first get to a city and we're new, it's tough. I'm not going to lie. Usually we rely a ton on our first employee, who's our local director, who is basically our culture and community creator. They already have their hands in the pot. Usually it's someone who's worked for a prior media outlet who knows what's happening in the city, and they already have a network that's been built there. And they'll be our first person that we kind of like go through a very large sprint around what's the basic needs of the city, who are the people who are making this place a better place, and how can we help them do their job better. So that's where it usually starts. We find our first 10 or 15 partners on the ground that we think are really important for the city, and those are our first year of work is done with them pretty much exclusively. We won't take on smaller partnerships until we're at a place where we can actually handle them, because we want to really focus our efforts on what needs to be done at first. So usually it starts with it could be a community foundation. In Miami, it was the Knight Foundation. In Seattle, it was the Gates Foundation. And these are folks that basically have their finger on the pulse of the city, the issues that are being solved. In Miami, it was growing the startup culture. It was helping connect people on affordability, and it was transit and sea level rise. In Seattle, it's education, which is, you think a place that has that many people are educated is not an issue, but the Gates Foundation really sees that as more of like things they can even put more money into. It's homelessness, and it's basically, feeding the hungry who are in that city, because they have a big problem in Seattle. I'm not sure if you've ever been there before, but there's people living under bridges that have whole communities that have been built from scratch. There are people who are like displaced, and they don't have nowhere else to go because the city hasn't invested in these infrastructures for the homeless to live in. Miami has a similar problem. Not as big as Seattle, which is strange. You'd think if you're a person who's homeless, you live in Miami because it's very nice outside. But this doesn't happen. You would think. I'm like, I walk through New York all the time. I'm like, why is everyone who's homeless living in New York and not in Miami?
Well, we were talking a little bit before about networking in general, and I think networking kind of gets a bad rap sometimes. As far as tips for effective networking, I got to tell you, before I even met you, that's what I heard about you. Somebody told me what a great networker you are. So how do you even get into the process of networking? Where do you start? Do you even think about it as networking anymore when you meet people?
I don't. I really go into it a lot of times blindly, as you would like a friendship. You get a vibe from somebody and understand, what their world looks like. But you never know who you're going to meet and what kind of impact you can have for them and they can have for you, because you have to have a conversation with everybody. So I talk to a lot of people. Some are hugely beneficial for myself or for them. Some become just acquaintances. Some become clients. You never really know who you're going to talk to. I do a lot of kind of talking to people randomly sometimes when I see something of interest on social media. I'll just go out and just ping somebody on Instagram. I'll say, hey, this is interesting. Tell me more about what you're working on in Miami about this. And if there's something that we can work on together, great. And then, it's just being in places sometimes where you're open, you have a smile on your face, and you look welcoming enough to talk to. I also wear very bright shirts, if that helps sometimes. People are like, that guy looks like he's someone who I want to talk to for a minute, which kind of wasn't my purpose of doing this. I don't know why I ended up wearing these shirts, but I just end up loving them so much. And they always give me a reason to talk to somebody. It'd be a good conversation start. Like, hey, nice shirt. Like, thanks. What's your name? And from there, it kind of goes off into wherever it goes. So there is a kind of a nice perk to having that style that I've adopted. But I think it goes back to also being the person that creates opportunities for other people, because you never know, if you have the ability to make someone's life a little better, or you have to give them a chance to reach someone that they haven't had a chance to reach out to, and I can do it, I'm going to do it, because I've had to ask for things a lot of times when I was younger. I didn't have a way to connect with people, and I was shy maybe, or, I needed my first job, and it's tough. It really is tough. So if it takes you a 2-minute email, you should probably do that, because you don't know where that person's going to end up in their life. And, it's just the right thing to do.
So you get a ton of inbound and you send a lot of outbound. Any tips for effective ways to actually reach out to the people you want to reach out to?
I think it's adding value for them, because people don't want to just help for no reason at all. I've recently went to Boulder, Colorado to kind of discover that city for us as we're going to open there. And I reached out to the top people there. I reached out to Brad Feld. I'm like, hey, Brad, I'm coming out to Boulder. Can I meet with you for coffee and hopefully try and, help your city grow? I think it was the second part that actually made him like, oh, how can you help my city grow? It's already becoming a very big place for startups, but there's still more to go. So I think it's like trying to understand how you can add value for that person first before you ask anything in return. So it has to almost be mutually beneficial, I think, sometimes, when it's someone who's of larger stature than yourself.
Yeah, I've talked about it on this podcast before. It's about giving value to someone, but it's also about knowing what value you can add ahead of time. Like, you don't go in blind. You should do research on the person and actually know what you can offer them, instead of just asking them how you can provide that value.
Yeah, I get it all the time. I get people asking me, can I pick your brain? And I'm like, what does that mean? I'm like, isn't this my brain? Do I get to keep this after our 2-minute coffee? There needs to be some sort of basis of the conversation. It can't be just too general and open. Sometimes you can have that conversation over email instead of having an in-person meeting. So cut to the chase sometimes and just say, hey, here's my exact focus. Is this of interest to you? And if it is, great. If it's not, don't worry about it, because you're gonna have to take a lot of those shots to find the right person sometimes.
So we're talking about before this about events. What do you think makes a successful event?
It's connections. It could be small, it could be large, but it really has to come back to if you got any value out of that connections that you've made. I host a lot of small gatherings back home, and wherever I am in a city, I'll have a 15 to 20 person kind of dinner, and I'll do a good job of inviting folks who don't know each other. There's a thing called a Jeffersonian Dinner. I'm not sure if you know what that is. Thomas Jefferson is a really interesting fellow. He used to have his dinners where he would invite people over to his house, usually about 12 people, and there'd be one rule. You can't talk over somebody else. And they'd be one topic of conversation. So they would pick one issue that was happening around that city or wherever he was, and that the whole night would be about that one topic. And you have people who don't know each other. Usually it's people from all walks of life who have different viewpoints. And from that, you get real organic conversation happening where people have no idea where the person comes from. They're this is a person, I don't know who you are. I don't know what your opinion is until I hear you hear it out first. And then you can get into having a real relationship with that person. And I've seen from the past year of doing these things, I have people who have become instant best friends from these dinners that they didn't know anybody at, that they were totally blindsided by at times. And it takes someone to really trust the person who organized the dinner to actually go to one of these. Where who's this person going to invite? Is it going to be worth my time? Is it going to be weird? Is it going to be a waste of my time? And that is something that you have to build up to. So maybe you start small. Maybe you have a dinner with 2 people, and you kind of build that trust with somebody. And some people don't have a big network, so they can't have big dinners. But you gradually get there. When I was 25, I was not having these type of engagements with people, and it's tough. It takes a couple of years of kind of testing the waters in that world. And even folks who are introverted have a really big talent to do that. They don't have to be the leader of the talk. They could just be the person that actually convenes it.
So that kind of actually brings me to Breakout, because that reminds me of how Breakout kind of runs some of their weekly meetings. How did you get involved in Breakout? What is Breakout? And if you could talk about how that's kind of similar to what you were just talking about a little bit.
Yeah. So I met the fellows from Breakout when they came to Miami a couple of years back to throw their event here. And they had been put in touch with me, I think, from the fellows at Knight Foundation. And they were like, hey, they're coming here. They want to know what's what in the city and what to cover and where to basically have their events. And I was like, this sounds like something I want to get involved in, because I want to show them the right Miami. I don't want them to see the wrong things in the city. There's a lot of tourist traps here, but there's a lot of great things that are happening on the ground here that I want to have people see and kind of experience. And I went to the event with them. I helped them kind of do some small programming here. And I really saw their underlying issue is their focus is they wanted to have people make those real connections with each other. So it's small by design. There was 70 people over the course of 3 years that hung out together. And you're kind of like in the same situation a lot together. So you got to meet everybody in person, which is really important. Because a lot of these big events, you get lost in them, right? There's no real kind of rhyme or reason to them. And you end up just not making really good relationships with people who are at the event. It's like more like fast, like airplane friends. Like you don't get to actually like follow up on this conversation, and you don't see the person again and like the next day. So they made a point of like having you have smaller talks with each other, and you make some nice connections. And what's great at Breakout is everyone there just gets that one thing, is that I'm going to go in this, and I'm going to know that everyone here has already been like kind of like vouched for, where like this person is a good person. You know, they have a good kind of frame of mind where they want to help each other. So it never gets to a place where it's like someone's trying to take advantage of someone else, and they all kind of like want to understand the city together and see how they can bring back learnings from that place to where they live, and vice versa. Can they have some impact where they can kind of lend their expertise or their network to help people in places they're discovering? Because a lot of times people come to cities and they may take, but they may not give back to it. So they've done a good job of actually putting their flag in a place and actually fueling that and giving back to the place many times over. So I've seen it happen in Baltimore, I've seen it happen in Chicago, I've seen it happen in Portland, in Miami, and they've kind of done some good leave behinds, and they've helped people in those cities make larger connections outside of where they live.
So then what led you, this is kind of a completely separate topic, what led you to creating Social Venture Partners Miami?
It kind of came out of nowhere. I can't take credit for myself because Lauren Harper is our director. She brought it back because she runs a really great shared space called the Center for Social Change. And it's a free space for nonprofits to work out of. And she was trying to devise a way to have more funding put into these social good kind of entities that they couldn't find from just people donating to it. So this kind of started in Seattle, oddly enough, about 20 years ago, from a fellow from Microsoft who was the head of sales there. And he wanted to give back to Seattle in a way that he wasn't doing, financially. And he knew there's a lot of money in the place that can go back into these social good efforts happening on the ground. And from that model, they've had a lot of things launch out of that place, and they now have 50 locations around the world. So Miami had no kind of background of training people to invest in, social good entrepreneurs. And it wasn't really on the radar at all. So it's the first time anyone's actually done this in Miami, to kind of like put money towards a smarter way to invest in nonprofits and for-profit entities that do a social good. Because a lot of times people just donate and the money goes just to a place where they don't know where it goes to. It kind of goes to a larger fund, and they're funding their operation of how they've done in the past. But there's always ways to help these entities kind of think like a startup, and that's our biggest goal, is like having folks think of how I can maximize my dollars to have impact in the city that we're in. And it's just teaching them kind of basic business principles that a lot of nonprofits don't think about, because they're always thinking about the biggest like impact of like how it can do good, but they're not thinking about how to sustain without people donating to their actual cause. So it's trying to make these like models of revenue coming in the door that are sustainable and can last without people donating.
So how do you vet and actually decide who's a change maker, who's worthy of investment?
It's a long process. It's about a 6-month process of, applications. So that's about a month of like people from all walks of life applying to kind of like say what they're up to. And we have a very rigorous system for that. We meet with every person, personally after like the first round of submissions. We're now down to about 30 finalists. And they go through a 3-month process with us where we actually are hands-on with the board to kind of devise a business plan to repitch us for the actual money investment into our entities. So it takes about 6 months. And then we just had our first pitch day 2 weeks ago. So we did down to our final 10. So it's not just like a random like assortment of people. It's like we really take time to like vet these companies, these entities, and give them our feedback to put into action immediately sometimes. So we're going to pick our top 3 in 2 weeks. So we're pretty pumped about them. We have some amazingly hard choices to make. But our biggest thing is finding entities that can scale outside of Miami. So they start here, but can they bring their idea to different places? And that's what we need to have happen to kind of show folks the value of putting money into these entities that they haven't thought about before. Miami's been really big on, of course, real estate investment. That's been the biggest thing here. Everyone invests into like making money through that. But they haven't really seen the like kind of idea of like, can I invest in something, can I make money on it, and also do well at the same time? And that's something that we really need to teach people here, because a lot of people here are not from America, honestly. They're from other places, and they're not really tied to the city as a whole because they're pretty new here. So it's kind of teaching people like how to like have that kind of place of passion in their own city that they're going to be doing business in or living in. That is huge for us to kind of get this place on the map.
So how many companies have you guys invested in total?
So this is our first cohort. We started in May, in
Congrats.
March. Yeah, so we're going to have our first 3 people that are going to invest in. We're probably going to do a couple other ones where we're going to mentor. So we'll probably have a cohort of about 10 this first time around, I hope. Still TBD. The one I love so much is the one called Guitars Over Guns. And it's a nonprofit that teaches kids who are on the street, sometimes they're in gangs, sometimes they're turning in their guns for guitars or for drums or for instruments. They teach them how to play an instrument. And they teach them how to become, basically how to have their own business. So they become like an entertainer of sorts, and they go do, events, and they end up becoming mentors for other kids off the street. So they're basically exchanging their guns in for guitars. And this is something that we think can scale across the country because there's a lot of value in mentorship from peer to peer. So it's not like me talking to you. It's like your own kid who you see in your class who's a senior who becomes, basically a musician that will teach you how to become that as well. So there's a lot of that happening here on the ground. Also a great one called Buzzbox, which is a really awesome idea, but I think can scale too. It's basically it's a transit oriented a mobile barbershop. So barbers give free haircuts to kids, and in the meantime they're getting a haircut, they're getting mentorship during that haircut. So it's like, usually the process of getting your hair done, right? Like you have an hour with that person. It's a very intimate experience.
Yep.
Why not put it to you? I mean, your hair.
I do know. Hair people are definitely new therapists. They're therapists for everyone. They know all your life stuff. You see them maybe once a month, you spill your guts. And I mean, that makes so much sense to me.
It does. I mean, my mother was my first mentor, right? And she's cut my hair since I was age 1. And that's kind of like our alone time together. It's like, hey, let's talk about what's going on in your life while I'm getting a haircut. And, that's happened a couple of times. I think you're in Atlanta. You saw the guys in Detroit doing that. They were doing a little barber shop in the hotel room. And that was basically people getting mentor sessions while they're getting the haircut. And it works because, the kids who get the haircuts end up, going back often. And it's not because the haircut was that great. Maybe it's because that person actually had a connection with them. And we hope that can be something that we can invest in across many cities because it's very inexpensive. It just takes some people to volunteer to give some haircuts and do some mentoring on the side. Yeah,
and depending what city it is, I'm assuming some cities have a barbershop mentality where you go in, like Breakout Atlanta, they had the barbershop kind of set up there, and you end up having a group conversation where I don't know about, other places. Like if I get my hair done, usually I'm only speaking to the person who's doing my hair. It's not so much a group activity, but I do think the barbershop mentality in general is a group activity. People are finished with their hair and they'll sit there, hang out.
Definitely.
I know you've made some investments in a few other companies. Can you tell me a little bit about those and what appealed to you?
Sure. So I invested in my own company, which is interesting because that's the biggest value I see is, putting money where your mouth is, because what we're doing here is really building, engagement in cities that maybe have not had the right approach to, information sharing. So I wanted to really get involved and really be all in. So you can't be any more all in when you're investing money into the company you're working for. I've also done investment in SVP because that's what I think is teaching that social good is what I really want to be doing. And it has to happen locally first because I think change happens on your street corner. It doesn't happen just globally first. It has to happen small. And then that, you have that kind of that scale impact of doing things locally, then it grows into something global, hopefully. I've invested in a CBD cannabis company because I think there's some medical benefits to that industry that can be used. And then just investing in local real estate that places that I want to get involved in was a thing for me to I never owned anything as a kid. I always rented, so I wanted to own my own homes, and I thought it was definitely a place I wanted to learn more about because this city, everyone has been involved in real estate for the longest time because it's a very new city. So I wanted to kind of learn how that world works. And it's really interesting because, most folks think it's a really, really easy get rich quick scheme, but it's not. It takes a lot of work and understanding, how to put those kind of deals together and then how to understand the long-term value of having an asset, which as a kid, I was pretty much poor. So I didn't know what it meant to have an asset as growing up. And I kind of realized that when I got older is the value of owning something and, how it has value for you long-term.
So you're doing a ton of things. What's the hardest part about what you do and how are you dividing your time?
It's balance. It really is a balance thing. I don't sleep much. My wife will tell me that. She's like, I need to, make time for sleep and for her. So, the weekdays are like, up at like 7 and home by 11 o'clock at night. So it's long days. I may have, overcommitted myself across many entities and doing too much of the event stuff. But weekends are definitely, for family. So that has been, sacred in me doing what I do. I'm sure other people have the same kind of approach to things. But that's it takes some work. Balancing your life, it takes a lot of work. I would definitely live and die by my calendar and, setting blocks of time where I know I'm doing this one thing. I'm not going to be taking my focus off that. That's huge. I don't know. It's tough. I'm not the best at it. I'm not going to lie.
So the podcast is about influence, and right now you're playing in a space, social activism, having influence to actually make change in a community is, I think, very difficult. What do you think creates and sustains influence in the social impact world, in the civic engagement world?
I think it's showing examples. I try and lead by example all the time at work and even in my other endeavors, because you have to show that you're actually putting in the work to do that. And then showing results. If I can show results from the things we're doing here in Miami that we can take it to other cities, that's going to help people realize that they can do it themselves as well, even starting small. So the ideas we have here are small in nature, right? They're not affecting a huge amount of people across the country, but they're going to start here and hopefully scale out. So that's my biggest thing, is having like really small wins and then building those into bigger wins. So if I can have a cohort start in Miami and kind of bring it to new cities, that makes me really excited.
So what can and should people be doing if they want to make a true impact in their community and they're not in Miami and they're not in Seattle or LA or New York?
You need to be taking an interest in your local community. That's number one. You need to vote. You need to understand what you're voting on. You can even take an interest in going to go to your city council meetings once in a while. Understand what's happening around you. Volunteer for a nonprofit board. It's really easy to do. Join a museum's kind of young patrons group. Really great to meet people across different walks of life. Get out of your neighborhood. Don't stay in the same place all the time. Really take a point to on a weekend, explore a place you haven't been to in your own city, because a lot of times we don't do that. I was guilty of that as a kid. I didn't go out of Queens a lot of times. I went to Queens, I went to New York, and that's really where I lived. I didn't go discover the Bronx. I didn't go discover, upstate New York. I didn't go discover different parts of the island. In Miami, most people kind of grow up in a place and they go to school there and they don't go and explore other parts of the place around them, because they're just they're scared, or they just don't know. So that's the reason why we do what we do, is we want folks to understand that their city is not just where they grew up. It's not just where they go to work. There's more to it than what they think it is. And people who live in those places aren't scary. They're just like them. It's the same people who live in places, rich or poor. They all are the same human beings, and they all have basic needs that need to get addressed and are being, hopefully that will help you understand what people go through in other places around the city, and you can hopefully get involved, and maybe that sparks an interest for you to go volunteer in that area. Maybe you want to help that neighborhood do a little better, and that's what I would recommend doing. Really get out there and put yourself out there and explore.
But I think a lot of people feel like their contribution doesn't actually make a change or an impact. What do you say to those people who think that their time doesn't matter and they should just put it into going to work?
Well, I think they're doing it wrong. I think they're doing it maybe with the wrong entities. They really need to, I think it goes back to doing things locally, because you have an impact. You can see it firsthand. So don't donate to a big organization. Donate to something local that you can be involved in and join their board and then help people in that place. For instance, if I'm going to look at Miami, I'm going to join something here that I can have impact on directly. I'm going to join Lotus House, which is a not-for-profit center that helps struggling mothers to get off the street, to train them on how to get a job, and they take them in with their kids and they give them a place to live. And you can go help them by mentoring. You can help them by giving them food. You can help them by working behind the as a line cook. You can help them by giving rides to places, and you can help people individually, which I think goes a way more. You can have impact like that than you could on giving money to the Red Cross. Not that it's not bad to give money to the Red Cross, but you can do things in your town that help much more, and you have tangible results from that. If you can help one person do that, you've done a lot. Most people don't do that. People walk by folks all the time on the streets who are homeless who don't even stop to ask them a question to see how they got in that situation. I think if you do that, you understand that there's another can of worms that you opened up there, to understand how someone got in that situation, because folks don't stop and do that ever.
So who do you think is truly influential in the social entrepreneurship space right now?
Oh man, that's a tough question. There's a lot of folks doing some great things. I'm going to go back to things I've seen through social venture partners. Paul Schumacher in Seattle is doing great things with SVP. I mean, they've made some really impactful investments into companies that have scaled out of the places they're in. He's one of the guys that I've looked up to for a while now, and happy now that I work with him. Even my father-in-law, I mean, to keep it granular, like he's had a big impact in the city in Miami. They have helped start the Miami-Dade College, which is the first college system in Miami that started from a small plot of land downtown Miami. Now it has 12 campuses across the county, and now it's the biggest college system in America. 400,000 kids per year go to that school. And that started just from as a family who wanted to give back to the city they live in and to do good. He has also started, Pinnacle Housing Group, which is a group that builds affordable housing products across Florida. I've seen just, how they take a stake of they're going to do the best they can to make people have a better leg up in life, because most folks who build developments that are affordable housing projects don't really care about the actual layout or the quality of life, how it helps people intermingle with each other. They care more about how they can maximize space and make profits. And I've seen him do a lot of work on putting art in public spaces, making parks in his actual developments, putting pools in places that people who build developments would never think of doing, because they're like, why would I do that? No one's going to pay me more money. But folks end up going to these places, end up getting better jobs, end up being happier in life. They end up going to, getting out of there and getting their own places that they're not affordable housing projects. They end up becoming on their own and self-sustainable. So I've seen it happen, in my own home, which is why I've gotten so involved, because I can see people who have just so much success in doing and getting out of the situations that they've been in.
If somebody was coming into Miami, they have 3 days in Miami, and they're just like, I want to see the city, show me the real Miami, where would you suggest they go?
Well, shameless plug, I would go to the New Tropic, and I would go to our neighborhood guides tab, where we profile the places that locals go to. So you won't see any tourist traps there. You'll have people who have had restaurants there for 30, 40 years. You'll see all the great people who have local galleries. You'll meet people who are running shared spaces here that start from scratch. You'll have experiences on there where you can maybe have a dinner with a chef who's started here in his parents' basement. It's a good place to start. You can call me, which is probably what everyone else ends up doing, is they call me and say, hey, I'm here for 3 days. What do I do? And I'll usually make some time to at least grab a coffee with somebody and give them the lay of the land. A lot of times it depends on what's happening in the city. There's a lot of events here, and there's usually some good ones every day. So you can kind of plan your travels around what's happening on the ground event-wise to go to and meet some locals. There's a lot of people just do tourist stuff and don't actually talk to and meet with people who live here. So I like to leave my vacations when I explore places open to have those chance interactions and meet somebody at an event, and then let's go in that person's rabbit hole. Let's see where the after party goes to. If it's going to a random bar, or if it's going out to someone's house party, or if it's going on a boat somewhere. I would definitely say get on the water. It's very important in Miami to do that. And you should definitely trust locals. So get involved, meet somebody. It's pretty easy. Most folks are pretty friendly here, even though they may not say it on the outside, but they definitely are. So if you have a person to introduce you, that's the way to go.
Well, I really appreciate this. Where can people find you? Where can people find Where By Us?
It's whereby.us. That's our main site that goes to all of our brands. And then you can find me most actively probably on Instagram at Chris Adamo, or on LinkedIn, also /Christopher Adamo. So reach out to me and let's hang out.
Well, thank you so much.
No, you're welcome, Brittany. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to Beyond Influential. If you found value in this week's episode, please rate and subscribe on iTunes. I'd love to know who you find influential. You can let me know on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Brittany Crystal, KRYSTLE, or visit my website, brittanycrystal.com.